In Chinese society, an infant must be taught 弟子规 or Guide to a Happy Life right after birth. Why? This is because the infant has already begun to learn. Never think that the baby is ignorant and doesn't know anything. We're totally wrong if we think like that. There are current evidences as shown in the books written by the American psychiatrist Dr. Brian Weiss. For example, Dr. Weiss used hypnosis to enable a 40-year-old person to recover memories from the ages of 30, 20, 10, 1, and the fetal stage. The person would be asked about his feelings as a fetus in his mother's womb, and he could answer. It turns out that before birth, the fetus's spirit in the mother's womb is aware of a daily life and habits. How could we say that the fetus is ignorant? The person under hypnosis would also be able to explain clearly the process of birth. Thus, the ancient Chinese's fetal education is well-founded. Once the fetus is formed, it has consciousness and isn't confused at all. Therefore, in Chinese society, a child's education begins right from birth at the latest. Once the baby opens his eyes, he can see and hear, even though he isn't able to speak yet. In his presence, adults should serve as his best role models. They must show completely positive examples and nothing negative. This is called foundational education. The family's guests must also be well-mannered in the presence of the infant, so that he isn't adversely affected. The Chinese proverb, "At the age of 3, you can foresee a person's character at 80, makes sense. By 3 years old, the child would have learned for 1,000 days already. This 1,000-day learning is deeply rooted and leaves a profound impression in his mind. It's too late to start learning after the age of 3. Hence, the Chinese attach great importance to education. Many people don't understand this because traditional education has been abandoned for almost a century, or at least 4 generations. Another traditional Chinese system that maintains peace and stability in society and the country is the family, or what's known as family education. However, the traditional family no longer exists, so family education also disappeared altogether. The traditional Chinese family was a large and extended one. The most important factor that enabled the sustenance of such a family for generations was the Jia Dao, or family philosophy, which involved morality, benevolence, righteousness, and propriety. In the absence of family philosophy, the family cannot be sustained. What is family philosophy? It includes the 5 moral relationships that are commonly shared among all families. The 5 moral relationships include the love between parents and children, and the righteousness between superior and subordinate. Both cases involve the relationship between leaders and followers. In a family, parents are leaders. Therefore, everyone must listen to them. The large extended family formed a society of 5 generations living together. The grandfather's generation would be the main managers of such a family, while the retired great-grandfather would be like an emperor's father who didn't interfere with any affairs. In a less prosperous extended family, there was more than 100 family members. For the average extended family that was prosperous, there were 300 to 600 family members. In such a big household, the entire family would be in a mess without family rules. Thus, family education is very important. The Tao, law of nature in Jia Dao, or family philosophy, is about the relationships among family members. Family rules are based on 弟子规. 弟子规 isn't meant solely for reading, recitation, and explanation. It's for parents and elders in a family to put into practice. Everyone has to practice it and should never deviate from it. When a child is born, adults will set a good example for him. This will naturally become his habits. It's known as family rules. There are also family learning and family enterprise. Family enterprise is the family career, while family learning is about academic studies. They are often interrelated. After the Song Dynasty, 960 to 1279 in China, Mr. Zhu Xi compiled 四书, or the 4 books. From then on, the 4 books became the core textbook for family learning. Regardless of the type of family and the family enterprise, all read the 4 books, so it became the common subject. Additional subjects to be learned would depend on the specific family enterprise. If the family practiced medicine, the members would choose the classic entitled The Yellow Emperor's Canon of Medicine, Spiritual Pivot. For families engaged in politics, they would choose classics about politics. For those doing business, they would choose classics about the way of running enterprises. Every industry had its own specialization. However, their common subjects were the 4 books and 5 classics. Some learned all the 5 classics, while others chose only 1 or 2. This was the family in the past. When such a family was harmonious, society was peaceful. Thus, a harmonious family led to prosperity. When moral education for children is absent or neglected, and the traditional family no longer exists, society becomes chaotic. This is why people feel insecure these days. Once you figured this out, you'll understand why people nowadays live in fear and uncertainty. Chinese family education and the spirit and function of the extended family were excellent. It helped to maintain peace and stability in China for 5,000 years. Among the three most important things in the extended family's function, the first was to take care of the elderly. The second was to provide proper education for the young. These were great missions of the family, not the individual. When a couple had a baby, it wasn't a matter that concerned two persons, but it involved the whole family. Similarly, taking care of the aged was not the sole responsibility of the children, but that of the extended family. Hence, when the family members grew old, they were able to enjoy domestic bliss, free from anxiety. Children would definitely receive good education, so there was no need to worry. The foundational education of a child from birth to the age of 3 was the responsibility of his parents. Bright and talented children received family education at the age of 4 or 5. Family education was conducted privately at the 私塾 or private school. Every family had its own private school. In formal schooling, the teacher helped in the children's development. At this stage, the kids were taught to read, but the focus was on recitation. The third function was to carry on the lineage. This was a major concern of any family. The ancestral hall was the place to pay respect to one's ancestors. The genealogical record contained the family history, and it would be clearly recorded and passed down from generation to generation. One could trace one's ancestors using genealogy. Before the invention of Chinese writing, everything was passed down orally. After the period of the Yellow Emperor, 2717 to 2599 BC, in Chinese history, written records were kept. For at least 4,500 years from the time of the Yellow Emperor till now, such family structure and education isn't found in any ethnic groups in the world except the Chinese. How valuable it is!